So one of my favorite stories from today. So we have Laurence Fox, who is an actor, acted in things. I would give you his biography, but I don't care to. So he was speaking on the James Dillingpole podcast, and he essentially said, and he was talking about the movie 1917, which is a World War I film about a particular. It's about a journey for two soldiers and their particular mission that they had. But and I don't. You haven't seen the film yet, right?
I've not.
Right. So I just watched it yesterday. And anyways, let me give you his comments and then we'll talk about it. So he says, it's very heightened awareness of the color of someone's skin because of the oddness in the casting. Now, what he's talking about is there's a Sikh character who's portrayed in the film. And it's the only Sikh character that's portrayed in the film. And for those who don't know, Sikh is essentially a person who. Let me find out the actual definition before because I felt myself wanting to freestyle.
Yeah,
and I was like, nah, you know what, this isn't the type of shit that you want to freestyle with. So let me.
Accuracy here is we value it on the Fade podcast.
Yeah,
not me, but you.
Fair enough. So Sikhism is a monotheistic religion that oriented in the 15th century in the Punjab region in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent, based on the revelation of Guru Nanak. And the term Sikh has its origins in the words, word that I cannot pronounce, meaning a disciple or a student. Anyways, so basically just like an Indian person who has their particular religion, right? So he says this phrase, or not this phrase, this quote, it's a very heightened awareness of the color of someone's skin because of the oddness in the casting. Now, a Sikh person shows up in the film, and they've got the head wrap and
turban.
I don't know why I said head wrap.
You about to get fucked up.
I know, right?
Talking like that.
Even in 1917, they've done it with a Sikh soldier, which is great. It's brilliant, but you're suddenly aware there were Sikhs fighting in this war, and you're like, okay, you're now diverting me away from what the story is. Now, what he's basically saying is like, hey, this Sikh person shows up and I'm immediately distracted because it's a Sikh person in this World War I film. Except it turns out that Sikhs were actually an instrumental part of World War I. And this was he was then rebutted by a lot of historians who actually noted the Sikhs instrumental part in World War I to the effect of there were about almost 75,000 Sikhs that died as a result of World War I because of their participation in it. And one of the reasons why I found this story so interesting was because this guy Laurence Fox, he had an exchange with somebody, and it was on some sort of British show. I don't know, I forget what the fuck it was on, but it was on some sort of British show where he had an exchange with a woman who I'm assuming she was black. I don't know, I couldn't tell from looking at the exchange. I didn't know exactly what she was from, but she was essentially calling him racist, right, for the shit that he was saying. Not to be confused with the quotes that I just mentioned, but something else that he was saying.
Something completely different.
Yeah, she was saying he was racist, right? And he was like, no, like, you're racist for calling me racist because you're just saying that because I'm a white male, right? Not because of any specific issue. So the reason why I find this all fascinating is because I think she was, and this points back to our original conversation in the podcast where we were talking about not understanding the context of what you're talking about, but just speaking about it as if you do, right? So for instance, he was saying in that exchange with this woman that, oh, I'm not you can't call me racist just because I'm a white male. But this exact situation points to the fact that, and she was talking about white privilege, right?
Yeah.
She was talking about white privilege, and he was like, what is white privilege? Like, he's basically like, what the fuck's white privilege?
And then he goes on to say, talking about this film 1917,
Exactly.
that like, the Sikhs being involved in the movie distracted me from the movie.
What white privilege is the assumption that even the appearance of one Sikh soldier is...
it's distracting. It took away from the movie.
Distracting because this is just a point of diversity and shit. You know?
And here's what happens when like American history is retold, right? It's the glorification of, you know, the great things that mostly white men, you know, some white women have done throughout American history to build this great nation, right? Is to completely overlook the contribution that like people of color have made, right? You look at World War II, hundreds of thousands of African Americans fought.
Even in World War
I, World War II, hundreds of thousands of African Americans fought in both wars, right? And a lot of those African Americans fought in World War I were, you know, people who were still battling fucking slavery and
the ramifications
and segregation and Jim Crow, right? And even in the army, like even the soldiers who were overseas fighting, right? The African American soldiers lived in different camps, lived under different conditions. They were not fed as well. They were not paid as well. They were not treated as well as like the white soldiers, but they were there fighting in these wars, right? They're very much a part of the story of what built this country. But when these stories are told, when these movies are made,
it's
always
revision.
The story of
just,
like
all white people.
Oh yeah, these brave white men fought for this country. Let's ignore the 400,000 African American soldiers who were there as well,
or the Indian Sikhs
they were just in a different camp. Or in this particular role, let's ignore the 75,000 Indian Sikhs who are very much an integral part of this story. Let's focus on these like brave white men, right? This is just and I'm not necessarily going to call this guy like racist, right? But, you know, because I don't need to, you know, you show yourself in time. But his logic, his way of thinking is that, oh no, the story was good as is. We don't need to diversify it. And that diversification,
but it's
distracts me from the movie.
It's again that presumption. That's what white privilege is.
Yeah.
I try to get people to see this all the time. It's just like it's not like you have white privilege in the sense that like even no matter what situation you're built into, right? Like that you automatically just like, so for instance, if you're the poorest of white people, like you're like, oh, you have it great in life. Like you don't need to worry about anything. You have great life. No, you still need to work. You still need to, but that's not what white privilege is. White privilege is the assumption. So for instance, if I'm a black dude, like for instance, me, you know, and you know, cat out of the bag, my girlfriend's white. So like if me and my girlfriend walk into a store, she's just walking around like whatever. Like,
she's
so for instance, the other day,
you're a suspect.
We walked into 7-Eleven and she's just walking around and she's just like she's not watching her hand mannerisms. She's not. I'm so fucking conscious of. I'm making sure that I'm not looking like I'm putting this in my pocket. I'm making sure that I'm out in the open. That I'm not trying to hide in the back of the store. That I'm just like up front. Like, hey, I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm just where she just walking around like whatever the fuck.
Without
like
a care in the
she's walking
world.
there with a big coat. She doesn't give a fuck. She's
not
like,
at all
whatever.
thinking about, oh, someone's like watching me. I could be being profiled right now.
So that's what white privilege is. It's not this thing where it's just like, oh, you're just you don't have a working life. It's the fact that it's the assumption. So just as Laurence
assumption
Fox,
of innocence and
exactly. It's just like Laurence Fox assuming when he's watching this movie 1917, there were no Sikhs in World War I.
Look at these brave white men fighting for our country.
Yeah. What are you ruining this with throwing this diversity thing instead of actually doing and actually knowing? He just made that assumption. Now he did make a comment afterwards. He said, "Fellow humans who are Sikhs, I am as moved by the sacrifices your relatives made as I am the loss of all those who died in war, whatever creed or color. Please accept my apology for being clumsy in the way that I expressed myself." Now he did do that apology, but and I do think that it's okay that he made the apology and it's fine. But again, like he's been on a number and maybe all of these things sort of happen congruently, like they just happen back to back. But I do feel like it's just like this thing where it's just like everybody's like, as soon as they hear white privilege, and this is why I encourage people, don't just go for calling people racist.
Yeah,
call out the logic.
Don't lead
yes.
with that labeling in the beginning.
Yes,
you gotta
lead with this shit. Lead with the BT Dubs. It turns out that Sikhs were an instrumental part of World War I, and
so label. I think the labeling comes at the end if it's necessary at all. Right? It's before you label somebody racist or sexist, homophobic, or Islamophobic, whatever the new labels are in 2020. I'm sure there'll be a couple more that pop up. Right? Before you label, allow the person, and we talked about this at the top of the show, allow the person to give you all the ammunition that you need, right? Show me that you are this thing, and show me consistently. And then when I attach that label to you and I call you this thing, there's no debate about it. There's no conversation. You've already shown me this.
Absolutely.
I'm putting the label on it that I'm putting the label on the jar, but you fill the jar up for me with the things that I'm labeling.
My thing is that I don't even want to call you the thing. And it's not because I don't think that people aren't racist. Clearly people are, right? Like there's such a thing as racism, and there's such a thing as institutional racism, right? Which I think this same gentleman refuted. But I feel like that's the least how should I put it? Like that's the least effective way of showing them that they're racist, right? The most effective way you could show somebody that they're racist is by using their own logic against them, right? Showing them. So for instance, this whole situation, I hope would have him question, oh, what are the assumptions that I'm making? Maybe the assumption that I'm making that Sikhs were just like, they're just throwing that in there because of diversity. No, you're whitewashing history without really understanding history, right? Like, so what he demonstrated is he had no concept of history, but he yet assigned a label to it. That's what white privilege is. That's what racism is, right? It's just assuming that, no, I'm white. The people in the film, a majority of them are white. So I'm just assuming that nobody else was there, that it was just us, right?
Yeah.
Not knowing that, of course, the Sikhs had an instrumental role. Like, look, I didn't even fucking know that, right? But I watched the film yesterday, right? And I actually read this article before I watched the film. So you would think I would go into there thinking like, oh, I'm looking out for the Sikh character.
Yeah.
I'm going to be highly aware of it. I actually forgot completely about the article until I actually saw the Sikh character. And then immediately upon seeing them, I just immediately was like, oh, yeah, there's the Sikh character. And then I immediately just got back into the story.
Yeah.
Because I was just, the actor was so good. And the situation didn't disturb from the story itself. So you have to talk to yourself about why that disturbed you so much that it took you out of the story.
And because you were looking at it with like an open mind, and like you accepted the fact that like, these are true events and this character was a part of the story that's being told.
Why do you not accept that?
Not accepting the fact that like this true story and this real character and these real events are a part of what actually happened, and stepping back from the story and being able to say, this thing is weird to me. This thing doesn't make sense to me. Like this thing that's very much a part of the story, I'm uncomfortable with. That's when there's something wrong with you, not like the film itself.
Yeah. All right. Let's move forward here. Let's talk about AA Ron. I'm sorry. And this was the quote that the Laurence Fox had about the Sikhs, the apology essentially.